go.
Kilayim, David, David. If two plants, if plant one plants two opposite two, and one projects like a tail, it is a vineyard. Two opposite two and one between, or two opposite two and one in the middle, this is not a vineyard, unless two are opposite two and one projects like a tail. If one plants one row on his and one row in his neighbor's, and a private road or a public road is in the middle, or a fence lower than 10 handbreadths, they combine. Higher than 10 they do not combine. And Rabbi Yehuda says, with one intertwined them above, they combine. If one plants two rows, if there are not 8 cubits between them, he may not bring seeds there. If there were three, they are not 16 cubits between one row and the other, he may not bring seeds there. Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov says in the name of Hanina ben Hina, even if the middle one was laid waste and there were not 16 cubits between one row and the other, he may not bring seeds there. Though if he had planted them from the first, he would permit it with 8 cubits.
Okay, so carrying on in this subject, Hanotea is Carmel al Shesh Esrei Amma. Shesh Esrei Amma. So if somebody plants a vineyard um, with 16 ammas in between each row, you're allowed to bring seeds in between them, and they're treated as individual rows. They're not treated as a vineyard, and therefore you could bring it up to 6 tvachim.
Okay.
So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maaseh b'Talmon be'echad shenateh karmo al sheish isrei amma. So we had somebody who made his vineyard 16 ammas apart for each row. V'haya hofech se'ar shtei suros letzad echad. So he trained the vines to go in the opposite direction. To I'm not sure why, because vineyards normally grow like pretty much in a straight line. Um,
Right.
so I'm not sure, but what he's talking about is like perpendicular to those vineyards. He trained the things to go in the opposite direction. Was near, and he would plant other crops in between the rows. ובשנה האחרת היה הופך את השאה למקום אחר, and then he would switch over years, and he would train the vines to go back over the area where we had previously been planting, and he would plant the untilled area on the other side. And they said, this is all fine. It's legitimate to do it like this. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon amim afa noteres karma al shmone amos motar. So that was actually my first reaction was, why would you need 16 amas when we already been saying that you only need 8 amas, or more than 8 amas between the rows, in order to permit things between. Because even if you've got a full vineyard on either side, even if you look at it as two vineyards on either side, if you've got more than 8 amas, then you just need then the 4 amas in between. Then you've got a gap in between what's far away from 4 amas, and that would still be mutar. So yeah, so I'm not sure what's the necessity for the 16 amas over there. I'm wondering if maybe this is not the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that we just saw in the previous.
It says
In,
here at the end, the last comment, 16 cubits must be left only in a vineyard which has been laid waste. But in a vineyard which has
Right.
not been planted from the first in a forest-based rows, a distance of 8 cubits suffices to prevent the rows from combining into a vineyard.
Although the wording of this Mishnah doesn't really lend itself to that, because it says Hanotea is Karmal Shesh Yisrael Ma Shesh Yisrael Ma. He's planting his vineyard lechatchila, 16
Uh-huh.
hours apart. So that's not a laid waste thing. That's how it was planned lechatchila, which means that it shouldn't even more than 8 amas. It shouldn't take on the status of a kerem.
Okay.
Just me chiming in there, and I'm not sure why we would what's the tzad of the 16. So yeah, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon seem to make sense to me. Anyway,
Right.
moving on to Perek Hey, Kerim Shecharav. What happens if a vineyard, let's say there was a fire in the vineyard, so it's burned down most of the vines, but there's still a few that are alive. Im yesh bo lelaket eser gafanim leveis sa'a netus kil chasan, harei ze nikra kerem dal. So what happens is that if in that vineyard you've still got 10 vines in a Beit Sa'ah, right? A Beit Sa'ah is 50 amas by 50 amas.
Right.
Okay. And if you've still got 10 vines that are alive and they are laid out in that 2 plus 3, the way that Beis Hillel defines it, then the whole thing is still called a kerem. Okay, and you still have to give it the 4 amas on all sides. Okay, kerem shehu natua irbuvia. What happens if somebody didn't know how to grow grapes and he just like planted them in random order all over the place? And אם יש בו לכוון שתיים כנגד שלוש, הרי זה כרם. Only if you come and look at it and see, oh, look, here's a situation among them where you've got two opposite three in that configuration, אחד יוצא זנב, then that's called a kerem. Im lav, eno kerem. Otherwise, they're all just individual vines and they only need 6 tfachim around each one. Rabbi Meir Omer Hoel hu nireh kesavnis hakramim harei ze kerem. So Rabbi Meir isn't happy with this idea. He says it still looks like that there are rows of there are rows of vines, and therefore he would still call it a kerem and only allow you to plant within 4 amas, after 4 amas. Mishnah base. Kerem shehu natua al pachos me arba amos. What happens if you've got the opposite problem? What happens if they're planted too tightly together? Now, 4 amas is basically like the height of a person stretched
Uh,
out. Okay. Anyway, that's just to give you that idea. It's like 2 meters, and that is too close. If you go less than 4 amas, that's too close to grow them efficiently. So what we're saying is that if the person who planted something like that is doing A/B testing, trying to see where does the vine take better. Is it going to grow better here, or is it going to grow better here? And we assume that his intention is to uproot the one that's not growing as well because it's going to affect him being able to work with the other one. So since his intention is going to be to uproot one, we treat it as if it is already uprooted. Okay. So Rabbi Shimon Omer Eino Kerem. Rabbi Shimon says this is not considered a kerem. It's not they're too close and it's not going to make 2 rows. V'chachamim omrim kerem v'royin esa entzayos ke'ilu einan. We look at the ones that are going to be uprooted as if they're already uprooted. So they're planted 3 amas apart. So you've got 3, 3, 3. Then actually you've got 2 rows over here that are 6 amas apart, and the one in the middle, that one's going to go. So it's considered a kerem, where Rabbi Shimon said it's lost the shame of a kerem because it's too tightly planted, and you would be able to plant within 6 tvachim of that. Okay, and halacha would be like the chachamim.
On
Okay.
to base Gimel.
Uh-huh.
If his field was sown with wheat and decided to sow it with barley, he must wait until it becomes wormy and then he turns it over, and afterwards he may sow. If it had already sprouted, he must not say, I will sow and then I will turn over, but he must turn over and then sow. How much should he plow? As a furrow after the rain. Abishul says so that he should not leave a quarter for a Beit Sa'ah. If it was sown and he decided to plant it, he may not say, I will plant and then I will turn over, but he must turn over and then plant. If he planted and he decided to sow it, he may not say, I will sow and then I will uproot, but he must uproot and then sow. If he so wishes, he may cut down to less than 1 tefachim, sow and then uproot. If his field was sown, if his field was sown with caraway or arum, he must not sow on top of them, for they only produce after 3 years. If some aftergrowth of Ithia sprang among grain, and likewise if several species sprang up in the area of the threshing floor, or if it was fenugreek, diverse plants have grown up, he is not required to weed them out. If he weeded or cut them, he is told uproot all except one species. Next.
Yeah.
And then, on to Peah. Vav Gimel. At the beginning of a row, the sheaf opposite proves. If the sheaf that he held to bring into town was forgotten, they agree that it is not shikha. And these are the beginnings of rows. 2 who began from the middle of the row, this one facing north, this one facing south, and they forgot before them and behind them that before them is shikha and that behind them is not shikha. If one began from the beginning of the row and he forgot before him and behind him, that before him is not shikaka, and that behind him is shikaka, because you shall not go back applies to it. This is the general rule. Whatever is included in you shall not go back is shikaka, and what is not included in you shall not go back is not shikaka. Two sheaves, shikaka, but three are not shikaka. Two heaps of olives and carobs, shikaka, but three are not shikaka. But they're not three shikaka. Two flax, shikaka, but three are not shikaka. Two grapes, parrot, and three are not parrot. Two ears of corn, leket, but three are not leket. These are according to Reish Hillel, and regarding all of them, Beis Shammai says three for the poor and four for the owner. Okay. And we are on to Nida. Yud Aleph. Regarding a young girl whose time to discharge uterine blood has not arrived and she married, Beis Shammai says we give her 4 nights. But Beis Hillel says we give her until the wound heals. Until she discharged blood while yet in her father's house, Beis Shammai says we give her the cohabitation of the mitzvah. But Beis Hillel says we give her the entire first night. If Anita examined herself on the seventh day in the morning and found herself to be tahor, and at twilight she did not separate in tahara, and after several days she examined herself and found herself to be tameh, she has a presumption of tahara retroactively for a period of 24 hours, or from examination to examination. But if she has a fixed period, her time suffices for her. But Yehuda says as long as she did not separate in tahara from the time of mincha or later, she has a presumption of tumah. You can come and say, even if on the second day of her Nida period she examined herself and found herself to be tahor, and at twilight she did not separate in tahara, and after some time she examined herself and found herself to be tameh, she has a presumption of tahara. If Azav and Azava examined themselves on the first day and found themselves to be tahor, and again on the seventh day and found themselves to be tahor, but on the other days in between they did not examine themselves, Rabbi Eliezer says they have presumption of tahara. Rabbi Yeshua says they have only the first day and the seventh day. Rabbi Akiva says they have only the seventh day.
Okay. Okay.
On to Elam. Okay. Tef Vav Zion. The blinds of an axe and its muzzle, the mud of bees and a fan, these are tahor. The cover of a jewelry box is tummy, but the cover of a clothing chest is tahor. The cover of a chest, the cover of a tani, the carpenter's press, the cushion placed under a chest, and its covering, the case of a scroll, the scroll, the housing of a bolt, a door bolt, the housing of a lock, and the housing of a mezuzah, cases are liars. These are cases of liars, cases of harps that form turban makers, the form of turban makers, then playhorse of a singing minstrel, the reviews of a woman wailer, a poor man's sunshade, the supports of a bed, and the form of a tefillin casing, and the form of garment makers, these are tahor. This is the general rule. Rabbi Yossi says any utensil that services the servitors of people both when they are in use and when they are not in use is tameh. But any utensil that is only of service to the servitors of people when they are in use is tahor. The sheath of a sword, of a knife, or of a double-edged knife, the cases of shears, of scissors, or a razor, the case of an applicator or a container for eye cream, the case of a stylus or compartment case, a case for an astronomical tablet, and a surgaya, surchata, a quiver for arrows and a quiver for bold arrow, they are tameh. Regarding the case of a symphonium, and one puts symphonium into the case from on top, the case is tameh, but when he inserts it from the side, it's tahor. Regarding a case of flutes, Rabbi Yehuda rules the tahor because he inserts it from its side. And the cover of a mace, a bow, or a spear is a tahor. This is the general rule. That which is made to serve in a casing is tameh, and that which is made to serve as a cover is tahor. Okay. The measure of all household utensils. Okay. And Sanhedrin. Okay. Sanhedrin, we have Zion Aleph.
Zion base.
Zion base. These are the species for those who are burned. They are placed in manure up to his knees, placed in a coarse scarf inside a soft one, and winded around his neck. This one pulls toward himself, and this one pulls toward himself until he opens his mouth. When one melts a jar of lead, it pours it into his mouth. He then descends into his bowels and burns his intestines. The Yehuda says if he dies in their hands, they have not fulfilled the commandment of burning. Rather, they have forced open his mouth with tongues, One melts the bar and pours it into his mouth, and it descends to his bowels and burns his intestines. Said Rabbi Elazar Tzaddik, it once occurred with the daughter of a Kohen that she committed adultery, and she surrounded her with bundles of branches and burned her. And they said to him, because the court at that time was not expert. This is the procedure of those who are beheaded. They decapitate him with a sword in the manner of which the government does. Rabbi Yehuda says this is a disgrace. Rather, they place his hand on a block, cut it off with an axe, and they said to him, this is no more disgraceful manner of death than this. This is the procedure of those who are strangled. They place him in a menorah up to his knees and place a coarse scarf around inside a soft one and wind it around his neck. This one pulls toward himself, and this one pulls toward himself until his life departs. These are the ones who are stoned: one who cohabitates with a mother or his father's wife or his daughter-in-law, or the male or an animal, a woman who brings an animal upon herself, a blasphemer, an idolater, one who offers of his children to Molech, a protection of Ov and of Yidoni, one who disrespects the Sabbath, one who curses his father and mother, one who habitates with a betrothed Ara, one who instigates an individual to idolatry, and one who leads astray an entire town, a sorcerer or a Ben Sora Ma'or. One who cohabitates with his mother is liable for having transgressed the prohibition of a mother and a father's wife. And Rabbi Yehuda says he is liable only for a mother. One who cohabitates with his father's wife is liable for a father's wife and for adultery, both during his father's lifetime and after his death, whether she was betrothed or married. One who cohabitates with his daughter-in-law is liable for his daughter-in-law and for adultery, both during his son's lifetime and after his death, whether she was betrothed or married. And one who cohabitates with another man or an animal, and a woman who brings an animal upon herself, or a woman sinned, what did the animal sin? But because the person came to the disaster through it, Scripture says it should be stoned. In addition to that, it should not occur that the animal passes in the street and people say, "This is the one with whom so and so was stoned." Every time I read that description of pouring the lead in the mouth, I
Yeah.
can't imagine that. Just all
Yes.
right. Um, Gimel, Gimel test.
Good.
Anyone was it? Oh, good. Anyone whom a slave, a woman, or minor read out must repeat after them what they say, and may a curse come upon him. If an adult reads for him, he answers Hallelujah. And it's a locality where a custom is to repeat, it is obligated to repeat. The reciting once, he only recites only once. To recite a blessing in the conclusion once to recite it. Everything follows local custom. If one purchases a lulav from his fellow Jew during the seventh year, he must give him the etrog as a gift. So he is not allowed to purchase it during the Shavuos. Formerly, the lulav was taken for 7 days in the temple, and from the provinces for 1 day in the first day. After the temple was destroyed, Yochanan and Zakkai ordained that the lulav should be taken in the provinces 7 in remembrance of the temple, and that it be forbidden the entire day of waving. Okay,
Okay. We're
good.
done.
Got you out on time. Okay, good.
Yeah, we're good.
Have a great
Thank you
day.
very much.
See you
Kodesh
tomorrow.
Tov.
Go to Stone. Hanukkah Sameach.